Okay, so this is Christian and Allie having our annual check-in and review. This is like simulation of what we do every fortnight and have done every fortnight for almost 9 years. And this is our chance to just reflect on a couple of questions that we pose to each other each year on where we've been and where we're going. So I want to start, Allie, as I did last year when I listened to the recording. I think I do this every year, but I just want to start with some gratitude for your friendship. It's been even more so this year for me, I think, a source of strength. It's been a very interesting year, and these sort of long-term friendships you can take for granted. And this year I haven't taken it for granted. I really am grateful that I've had you in my life, and particularly at certain moments, you've been such a container of strength and support for me when I've needed you. So thank you, my friend.
Receiving that. And thank you. I mean, I feel so mutual of just the like grounding that exists in our friendship of like holding not only kind of like a similar set of values, but like a journey over time. And when things are unsettled or when they shift, it's such a gift to have friends who are like know who you are beyond that moment of time, can see you in the future, have seen you in the past. And I think that's such a gift of our friendship and of you as a person. And I'm always often inspired by where your head's at and what you're thinking about and what you bring. So it's always been such a mutual boost and something I deeply look forward to.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, there aren't many constants in life at the moment, but our friendship has felt like a constant. So
Yeah,
that's a
totally.
really wonderful thing against all the
Mhm.
odds.
I know, totally. And maybe we'll meet in
we say
3D.
we say that every year, and
Yeah.
not yet. So the first question, I think you framed these questions when we first started using them. The first one was to ask each other what is one word that could sum up this year for us, a theme or a couple of words as a theme for our life. Do you have anything that comes to mind?
For the last year. It's funny because I think I went into last year wanting foundations was a word I wanted, and I think I got the opposite of that. Not really like maybe that's not fully true, but change was a big theme for me. But I'm almost seeing like this theme of like things turning over.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like I think experiencing change in a way that's like actually revealing the path that's meant to be, not just change for change's sake. It's like, no, this is what's next and what's meant to be next. Just turning things over and having them like turn over to a new side of them, I guess. I think that's something I would say. Probably need to think about it a little more. I also would consider this year my
Well, can
marathon
I tease
wedding
it
year.
out?
What?
Oh, really? Yeah, you
Yeah.
have gone to a lot of weddings this year. Why don't you talk a little bit more about the changes that have revealed, like where you're heading to next? Because it has been pretty significant in where you're going to be living in the next couple of months as well.
Yeah, totally. Well, I got the news in September, on September 1st, that I needed to move out of my apartment in Santa Fe, and that just opened the gates for much deeper reflection around place and this kind of yearning I've had to be exploring other places, but not really knowing there was no clear, like, you need to move here. So I'm decided to take the chance to just put things in storage and travel for a few months. I'm going to Mexico. I'm here. I've been kind of bouncing around since the end of October. And I'm in Maryland right now with my family, and I'll be heading to Mexico for a few months in January. And not sure what's on the other side of it. So I'm truly opening up to change, like that element of like change and turning over, just helping to reveal answers,
Yeah.
or I don't know, new perspectives. But Yeah, I feel as ready as I could be. Because I don't know that you ever feel fully ready, but
Yeah.
I feel embodied and able to make that a yes choice.
Yeah, because you came to Santa Fe with an intuition about forming community and being
Yeah.
connected to your tribe, and then didn't really pan out that way because of COVID and being in isolation for almost 2 years. Yeah,
Yes.
and so
Totally.
yeah, here you are, kind of looking for the next chapter and seeing where that's going to lead you as
Hmm.
well.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think there's been a grappling of whatever the timing was for me. Maybe it was just right that like I went to Santa Fe and experienced this chapter of a lot of like me time and a lot of isolation and reconfiguring what I need from community and relationships and seeing how important it is to me. And I think having to really confront that we can have these like visions and dreams of what a life or a chapter of our lives is going to look like. And then there's the actual experience of it. And sometimes it's just hard to let go of what you wanted the illusion of it to be versus the reality of it. And it took me a long time to get there
Yeah.
because there were many other things I really did love about my life there. And there was like this one big need that just got to be too big and finally like broke through of actually acknowledging like this is really important. I have to have this in my life.
I can see not just for you and me, but for a lot of people that I've spoken to, how that time in isolation of like 2020 to 20, let's say the start of 2022,
Mhm.
as painful as it has been, I can see how it served us all,
Yeah.
and I can see how it's I'm just realizing now in talking to you that that's actually been a part of a catalyst for change for me right now as well, where like my work isn't feeling as purposeful and meaningful to me as it
Mm,
was 3 years ago as well. And there's just like a desire or almost like an imperative to question things and
mhm,
really question, like, is this how I'm going to live my life? I mean, there's been other things that play for me as well, with having another close friend pass away from cancer, and just having a baby born in the last 12-ish months as well. Just this feeling of like going inward and actually like asking, you know is this really how I'm going to live my life? And not settling, or not compromising so much, or just not going against the grain. That's how I feel, at least at this point, is like a desire just to live life in the path that life is taking me, rather than in the way that my mind or my ego wants to go as well.
yeah, totally. 100%. And yeah, I think that inquiry was also so rich during that time of like, is this really what I want for my
Yeah.
life in some way? And a lot of the circumstances we were in were not chosen, of course.
Yep.
And it's still like opened up that reflection, I think, for other parts of our lives because there was space for it, I guess, maybe. What would you consider as your theme from this past year?
I tossed up a couple of words, and I think the main theme has been humility,
Hmm.
which is an interesting one.
Wow,
I've been
that's
humbled,
beautiful.
humbled significantly this year.
Hmm. Yeah, totally.
Um, there's the one kind of key example of that you and I've talked about is um, just this morning before the call as well, is I've run a business for 7 years that's been very successful, built around word of mouth and you know uh, going above and beyond for my clients, and not really traditionally marketing or hustling for business. And this year, despite doing great work from the perspective of my clients and the feedback that I've received, I'm facing, for the first time probably in 7 years, looking ahead to next year, having a very, very like light schedule of work, like, and some pretty major projects and programs that we've run over several years have been cancelled. And I'm grappling with, what I do next and how I spend my time. And I had a kind of point earlier in the year where I came back from paternity leave when my daughter was born, and I didn't have a lot of work lined up. And I hustled to kind of drum up some work and pushed and strived, those words that we've sort of addressed in previous years. And it didn't feel good and it didn't feel right. And I've kind of, taken this as a sign, from the universe that I'm actually going a bit against the grain now, and there's something different waiting for me as well. So it's been humbling to see the success of my business sort of dwindle, and it's also, I think, serving in some way that I need to, that I'm accepting at the moment as well. It's funny, there's I referred to this last year. There's a book called A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle that I read when I was on my AS recovery program last year. And in that book, he actually just gives an example, or gives a suggestion that anytime you can notice the ego being diminished, instead of reacting and trying to interrupt that, just sit with the feeling of like what it feels like to feel your own status or identity just be pulled down. And if we can, he sort of suggests, like, if we can do that, it's actually a powerful thing, because we are dissolving the ego, and we are not our ego, right? So we are actually allowing our true self to just have more space. And so I've had 3 or 4, I don't know how many of these conversations I've had in the last couple of months with clients that have either directly said we're canceling this project, or have just not gotten back to me. And I've just, to the best of my ability, just like sat with that discomfort of like, ooh, that's a hit to my ego, and just noticing the ego diminishing as well.
Yeah,
I've got a good story.
totally.
I told you this earlier in the year, but I've got a good story about job, work status, and ego. Is it a good time for me to share that now? So
Sure, yeah.
my mum and dad downsized this year significantly. That was a pretty big family project for us. And in that process, I was taking a lot of their possessions, 40 years of possessions that they had to get rid of to fit into a 2-bedroom apartment. I was taking a lot of their possessions to a recycling and waste facility on the Gold Coast where I live. And on the first trip there was a lovely man, must have been the manager of the waste and recycling area, with an Irish accent, who was very warm and friendly, and helped me to kind of know where to put some of the things that I had. And as I left that day, I was like, that guy just has a familiar sense about him. And I came back several times in a few months. And second and third time, I'm like, I think I can pinpoint who he reminds me of. And probably on the third time, I asked one of the guys there, I was like, I won't name who he is, because it's not important to the story. But I said to one of the other guys, is that so-and-so? Let's call him Fred. Is that Fred? And he said, yeah, that's that guy's name's Fred. Yeah. And I realized that this was actually one of my former bosses from a previous job. Let's say this is like over 10 years ago, so 11 or 12 years ago, who at the time was probably on $200,000 a year, wore suits to work every day, hired me and interviewed me for the role. And here he was working in a waste and recycling facility on the Gold Coast. But what struck me was just how satisfied and at peace, and that maybe this was me interpreting this for my own benefit, to learn a lesson here. But I just saw a almost like Zen-like quality about him, in a place that didn't have a lot of ego or status. And on that day when I sort of like connected that this was him, as I drove out, I just had this question like come to me, which was, what would I do for work if there was no ego involved.
Mm.
And I think that's something I'm kind of like sitting with at the moment as well. Like how much of what I've been doing in the last 7 years has had an element of status and ego and the idea of success that we share on LinkedIn and social media. And I mean, we've got to make money and we've got to get along in the world as well. But just like, what would I really do if I was acting from a place of
Mm.
authenticity completely, without needing anything from the world and not without needing to prove anything to the world?
Yeah, totally. That's such an important question to sit with and be with. It really brings to mind to me like what a 4-year-old might want to do. Not that that's necessarily the answer, but I think for me, as you were asking that, I was thinking of like, oh, I just want to like color and paint and, you know, get creative in all these ways that don't have to add up to anything
Yeah.
necessarily. And I was like, that's exactly who I was when I was, 4, 5, 6. It was the before, the world came in and tried to tell us it had to be any other way.
Yeah, and funny you say that because when you were saying like painting and drawing, and that's a part of me that has grown this year, has been the musician, like the creator. And I've made and played and recorded and dabbled and experimented in music this year just for music's sake. Like I've recorded 3 wonderful songs that I'm so proud of. I've released one of them. Don't know what I'm doing with the other 2. I'll get around to putting them out. I'm making videos, but more than ever, like that process has just been pure like creativity, and it's been the process so much more than the journey, and more than the destination, I mean. And yeah, that's exactly what you talked about there, of just like doing it for its own sake.
Yeah,
Doesn't pay the bills
totally.
though, Allie. That's
It doesn't, no.
no. So that's,
Yeah,
yeah, that's creating a great amount of uncertainty for me at the moment. But yeah, humility, I think that's really like a lesson and a theme this year, is when I have tried to control. It's a theme of my life, really, when I've tried to control and really, assert dominance over the world and life. um it's come back and said, we'll go with life at life's pace and in life's direction as well.
yeah, totally.
Mm.
I understand that
You
completely.
do, yeah. Yeah, I mean, like you came to Santa Fe with your own intention. Like that was a major sort of like the universe saying,
Yeah,
and
totally.
yeah, I've been journaling a lot this year as well. And one of the things that I really expected at the end of the last year with my AS recovery and sort of really being happier and more fulfilled and abundant financially than I have been for, throughout my life, was that things would just go onward and upward. And particularly with money, that I just thought I'd be making more and more money, and that more and more money to get a family home, move out of this townhouse by the beach. Come on, like, do we really need anything better than that ever? But to have a bigger family home with a backyard, and this is who I am. I'm wealthy. I deserve this. And then I heard, from God, from the universe, this voice that just said, "Who says? Who says you deserve that? Like, who says you need a bigger house to be happy?" And you know, I'll let you know. Just like trust me and follow this direction, and get over yourself, really. Like, and that's been a big lesson for me, I think, as well. Is just, I didn't realize it at the time, but I think, just chasing money is not with good intentions, because more money obviously can bring about more freedom of time and more quality of time with my family as well. But it is putting the horse in front of the cart a little, I think.
Mm-hmm.
It has been for
Yeah.
me, at least.
And it redirects like attention, and focus and energy. Because I can relate. I mean, it's a balance. It's a balancing act because I think I've definitely spent many years of my life not really trying to put much focus on it, and then it's stressful,
Mm.
and it's totally, that's not easy either. Like
No.
there's certain realities to taking care of your life, which I totally understand. And when it's like the sole focus, it just takes such a, it takes so much energy. And then I find that like what I'm allowing myself to explore or putting my attention and energy on is like narrowed. It's like way more narrowed than the like expansiveness that can open up when I'm not in that place necessarily, or I'm more open to life and like what life is bringing, what life is showing, what is actually in front of me versus what I'm trying to make happen from like my own brain
Yeah.
and
Well,
controlling
it takes us
time
out
to
of the
my,
present moment, right? It takes us out of the here and now because it's
yeah.
all about the future. More is
Yeah.
like the future.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
it's not enough. It's not being grateful for the here and now.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and then I find it can sometimes be harder to like give yourself permission in the here and now to just create and just play and just putz around and see what you're making because it's like, well, that's just not in the energy of making a thing happen. But
mm,
sometimes you need that. You really need, that's what creativity is. We've had many great talks about creativity this
yeah,
year.
yeah,
And I really have appreciated that, even though I don't think I'm doing a very good job right now making that time. I understand that I'm making a sacrifice around that. And that's something I want to bring more into my life, especially when I'm traveling.
yeah. Well, that in our last call a couple of weeks ago, that's something we chatted about was it begins with an intention, and making that a
Mm.
priority and then finding the little
Yes.
windows of time. And that for me, music has played out that way in the last 12 months. And it's probably like there's a little like verse in the Bible that says, where your treasures are, there your heart will be too. And
Mm.
I think about the sort of my treasures this year have been the songs that I've been working on, and developing, and in the little windows of time that I've had between meetings or workshops or whatever, I've been downstairs in my studio plugging in my audio interface and getting into GarageBand and just demoing and the next part and adding the guitar part. It's really the thing. I think that can also tell us a little bit about where we're heading is like the things we do when we're procrastinating or um, when we've got those little spare moments. But definitely,
Yeah.
like my heart has been there. If I'm honest, I've done my best with my day job, and also there's a part of me that's been pulled in another direction as well.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Mm-hmm.
keen to get on to the next question because I think this will be interesting. It's about things that we from the year that we are ready to let go of, or the more painful or stressful elements of the year. So what's front of mind for you that you feel ready to let go of from 2023 or say goodbye to? What's been
Mm.
most difficult for you this year?
Oh, I may have to sit with that for a bit. What's coming up immediately? I had a really hard time just letting go of my home.
Yeah,
That was really hard for
yeah,
me because it wasn't my choice to leave at that moment in time, even though I think it's good.
yeah,
Um, and it's like it's the first time I've lived by myself. It's the first apartment I've decorated all myself, and I love designing spaces. It's one of my loves. That's something I'll do with my spare time easily. And yeah, so letting it go was really hard. And I was very attached to my favorite coffee shop and my sunset walks and just these things that grounded my life and gave me a lot of sanity during such a hard time. While I did have so much isolation, I also had these like grounding rituals in my life, and they brought so much meaning to me. So letting them go while I also let go of my home, that was hard, I think. And that was like a very painful process. I had a lot of grief. it definitely took a whole emotional experience to let it go. Um, and yeah, I guess it's just feels true that like it can be right to let something go and still really, really painful and hard. It's like they're both true. One does not negate the other. I wanted in my head to just be like, well, this is the right thing, so it will feel easeful to just move out and move on. But it wasn't. It was painful. It was hard. It was a tough move. Um, and yeah, there's just a lot that I've had to say goodbye to on that front with that part of my life. I think also just saying goodbye to that chapter of my life and what it was for me, because it wasn't what I had on my vision board, and
Mm,
yet it was this whole other thing that just like served up so much growth and so much like profound learning to like connect with myself and my body and nature and letting myself be in this slow drip of change and learn and embodiment work and learning about where my curiosity goes. I really felt like change over that period of time was very profound, but it happened almost like if you leave a faucet just barely on and it's like dripping one drop, every however many hours or once a day, there's a drop and you're collecting the water in a bowl. You
mm,
won't notice it for the first bit of time, but give it a month or 2 months or, however long you start to really see, oh, there's something here.
mm.
But it's so slow when it comes out. And that really summarizes how I feel I've been, that's how my change has been feeling to me living it. It was like, it's just like one tiny hairline thing at a time,
I feel like that
but
is
it
a
also
really
adds up.
grown up form of change, Ali. As we are sort of maturing as well, like I feel like we both moved away from the drastic change of um transformation, of
Yep.
this like dramatic transformation of a peak
Yes.
experience that will totally disrupt my life and give me a new outlook on life as well. It
Yeah.
doesn't hasn't been sustainable for me in my younger years.
Yep.
And yeah, the second theme word that I was going to refer to was patience, because
Mm.
this year has really been an experience of patience for me in so many ways. With a newborn at home again as well, we've had a lot of sickness, and our daughter's been very sick since she was born with just mostly mild, persistent flus and vomiting and diarrhea and all that kind of stuff. So sleep has been very disrupted for a good percentage of the year. And so much of that I can see now is like serving just that mindset of just breathing, being present,
Mm.
slowing down, getting through this day, getting through this moment, trusting that things are changing and going to get better. And they do. And then after
Yeah.
12 months, you can see like, oh, that went by quickly, or like, wow, haven't we come so far? These little bits. And
Yeah.
even with music, just the little bits and pieces that I've done over short periods of time, to accumulate these like complete works that feel, beautiful and rich
I
as
know.
well. It's
I
that's
think it's so easy to underestimate that, right? Like it's so easy to overlook it in a culture that seems to really value the big and bold and like dramatic changes. And yet that's, I think, where some of the most sustainable, lasting change comes from, or the most possible, I guess.
yeah.
It's really in the like everyday and it can be mundane, it's not always sexy. And I think that's partly why it doesn't get as much street cred. But I heard someone say we often overestimate what we can do in a year and underestimate what we can do in 5 years.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I really I'm finding that to be true. I stayed in this Airbnb after I moved out into house where I had stayed 5 years ago. And I had this like crazy moment of being like, whoa, my life is like is unrecognizable from 5 years ago. Like
Yeah.
so much has shifted and changed.
I remember that Airbnb. I remember us having a call from, was it like, what's the color of, like, not beige, but just like a burnt umber or something, a really like yellow.
Sienna or something. Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
When you were
Yes.
contemplating moving to Santa Fe, hey, like that, you did the trip.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
5 years ago.
Totally.
Holy moly.
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
cool is that to go back to places, and that, as a recovering architect, like, place contains our identity. A place can reflect back who we are through memory, and through having that memory like grounded in the imagery of that place, so that we
Yes.
go back to that place and we are taken back to who we have been in the past. I can say that, from my own experience of packing up my childhood home with my parents over several months this year, and just like, yeah, how that body memory or whatever it is that is actually like taking us back there, and allows us to see
Yeah.
ourselves as we were, and if we're aware enough, as we are, and who we have become as well. It's wonderful.
Yeah, totally. We need those moments, right? Otherwise, it's just so easy to pass it by, but it's so important to get that moment of like, it's like tangible clarity that things have changed. You have changed who you've
So
become.
could you pinpoint any specific like realizations that you had when you were in the Taos Airbnb?
I mean, I think I was just looking at huge cycles of my life.
Yeah.
I moved. It was before I met Ryan, who was the last romantic partner I had, and just everything that I learned in that relationship. And we're kind of in this phase of really seeing about what friendship is like at this point, not together as partners, but I learned a lot just from that connection. And I I just also really saw like who I became by being willing to make a move to such a different place and to really let go of kind of my East Coast identity and have it to I mean, in some ways I really relate. It's very different, but like living in a place where like no one knows you and no one recognizes you for what you do, and
Yeah.
in some ways that are refreshing, like no one cares what you do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I had to let that part of me die away, in a sense. And to like reroute into something more expansive, like who am I that isn't just like a coach and a facilitator or an organizer of community or how like seen in these ways by these people, but rather like who am I as a person, and what are my interests, and what do I value, and what makes me feel playful and joyful, and where do I get, spontaneity and delight and groundedness and centeredness.
Mm. This has been a
Yeah.
really like common theme throughout our relationship, actually. And I had this like intuition to ask you about this, or reflect on this in our conversation today, because I just realized this morning when I was preparing for this call that when I was an architect in 2000 up until 2010, I reached this point of feeling like almost like fed up of not inauthenticity, like fed up with being stuck in a role, playing a
Hmm.
role. And so I did something pretty drastic at the time. I had other things going on. Obviously, it was a pretty significant part of my life. And I just got away from it. I got a one-way ticket to Scandinavia, and the volcano happened, and the rest is history. But I really just wanted to like detach myself from that identity and that community. And I did. I walked away from architecture completely. The colleagues and the events and the identity that I had as a young architect, I just like tore up. And anytime, when I came back to Brisbane, where I'd sort of be confused, or people would say, "You're still doing architecture," I'd sort of cringe, because I'm like, that's not who I am. I am not an architect. And then so I got this role at managing the Asia Pacific Design Library a couple of years later, after quitting architecture. And I became this role of a public figure, hosting public events, going to networking events, speaking, presenting at conferences across the world, and being seen as a leader, a thought leader, maybe in my part of the world. And then again, like after 3 or 4 years, I just started to feel this like irritation of like, I got to get out of this. This is not who I am. And I moved to Iceland. And then maybe this time but I can feel the parallels with these other waves now, where I've been this facilitator and educator and, figure, at least. And it's definitely felt more authentic than anything I've done before, now as well. But I'm just feeling like, this is not who I am. It's just another role that I'm playing. So yeah, I'm curious about if there's a healthier way I can do this without this, like, abandoning and sort of cutting ties completely with all of these communities and worlds that I get to know through these identities. Because it's a challenge, right? People see you and they want to make sense of the world, and they want to see you as a certain role, as a, Christian the facilitator, or Christian the architect, or Christian the manager. And so when I want to sort of cut ties from that and just say, well, let's just be, see me as who I am as a person. I'm this and many other things, and none of those things. I don't know. It's just it's a conundrum, really.
It makes me wonder if that's a gift to people to see you change like that, I think it can be medicine in a world that wants you to stay the same and wants you to like pick a path and play it out. And for some people, that is the journey, like that is getting masterful at a thing is the right path. And there's nothing wrong with that. And it's not a one size fits all,
Yeah.
and I think
Yeah.
we've so valued that one way that there's no like credit to that morphing and changing and growing and evolving. And I find so much healing and wisdom, and I think it's so inspiring to see people willing to do that. I hear you maybe on like, does it have to just be completely burned down? Or is there another way? And yet I trust that you will find your way in figuring that out. And I still really think there's something deeply medicinal about that, about being willing, I mean, and I'm probably projecting because that's something I value, and I'm always trying to give myself permission to do it,
Yeah. Well, you left the East Coast and moved to Santa Fe, so you're definitely in the same school of thought as
Yeah,
someone
totally.
who buys a one-way ticket to Iceland as well. Even just like when I left high school, there's some people who stay friends with their high school friends for the rest of their life, and that's their friendship group. And just like when I left high school, I was ready to like form new friendship circles and start anew as well. So yeah, maybe it is something I need to accept about myself and find a sustainable way that's doesn't sort of churn and burn too much.
Yeah.
But yeah, I appreciate that reflection as well, because you're right. I can't be the only person who's feeling trapped in a role or an identity that society has, and I've created for myself, I should say, as well. I take that responsibility.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, this is what I truly feel is like, I am not any of those things. I'm not changing. I'm like my higher self, my spirit is eternal, and it is, and it always has been. And I'm just the things that are changing, the roles that I take on. And so I feel like I'm ready to take on some different roles.
Yeah. I love that.
And I'm not changing.
Completely.
I'm still the same.
Yeah, I feel like that's its own whole topic. Or could be its own whole like
Right.
thread. I also am
start a new
curious.
recording.
Yeah, exactly. Pause, pick up, play something else. But I realized I did not get to ask you yet what you're letting go of. I mean, I think you're kind of speaking to it in ways.
Yeah. No, I think I probably covered it. It's the financial attachment, the attachment to, well, the financial uncertainty, I think, the stress associated with trying to control and be focused on money. Other things, there are other things, that have been a part of a letting go process. And my dear buddy Matt, who passed away from cancer at the end of January this year, I thought having a eerily similar journey to Grant 5 years ago, with stage 4 bowel cancer in his late 30s, and all the growth, post-traumatic growth they call it, that I had from navigating that situation with Grant, I thought would have prepared me better for for the emotions that I felt in Matt's passing. And yeah, grief is just it's a messy ride. And yeah, I still feel so many things about him and his life and his passing, and just the love that I have for him, and the sadness in not growing old together and sharing the rest of our lives and playing music together. It's been huge. And yeah, what struck me about what you talked about with your place in Santa Fe as well, so many different forms of grief, but Buddhism kind of talks about attachment being the source of all suffering. And so by extrapolation, we'd say, well, don't get attached to anything, don't love anyone, don't love your children, don't connect with anything. And I think that sadness and suffering is the price we pay for love, for attachment. And
Yes.
that's a cool thing. I think that's a good thing to focus on, is like when I'm feeling sadness, and maybe that applies for you with Santa Fe as well, is just like, oh, it's because I love this. How lucky was I to have shared this time with, Matt, and the wink and the nod while we're playing music, and then just the magic that happened, when we're all in synergy together. How lucky. And yeah, the other stuff is sad as well, but like focusing on the love, how lucky we are to love. And it doesn't last forever. Well, it lasts forever, but the form of the love doesn't last forever, perhaps.
Yeah, totally. The form has to change.
Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that, because it's a really beautiful thing to be able to come back to, of just like, can you celebrate the love you have, for what you have in your life?
Yeah.
Where's the love you have and what you've poured in? And because that's what life is about, at the end of the day, it actually is about our attachments.
Yeah.
Because when we pass on, that's when you lose the ability to attach in the same way. It's
Yeah.
part of being embodied on this planet, is like having those kinds of relationships too. Because I think you could easily say relationship, not quite the same way, but to be attached is to be in relationship to something, and our life is relationships in some way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've seen it with my parents as well, having to let go of the family home, and particularly my dad, who's a builder, has collected 40 years worth of building had collected 40 years worth of building materials in the backyard of their 5-acre property. And so the kind of attachment to those objects and things that each one of them, like, he had identified with, and that required a sort of letting go and grieving process for him as well. I learned a lot of humility in the process of supporting my parents as well, because I learnt, well, I had a view of like, there's a job to be done, X and Y. We need to move this much stuff out of here, get mum and dad into this place by this date, have this contract, very prefrontal cortex, and didn't account for their own emotional journey and their need for autonomy and agency as well. And it was a lot of suffering for me just to see the way that they were going about things, because it wasn't how I would have done it. And then I gained so much peace in the sort of final weeks when I just stepped back and said to my parents, how can I help? Just let me know. What would you like to do with this? Offering, like, I can get somebody, we can pay someone to come and take this stuff away. Is that helpful? Really just like trusting that they would get through things at the pace that they needed to as well. Here's another thing that I'm ready to let go of that I just realized is urgency. This year has had a lot of false urgency, and we've talked about this in our calls as well, but I attribute this to Matt's passing, actually, and a sort of like visceral awareness that I could die, because I've got proof of 2 of my best mates dying young. And so subconsciously, by association, perhaps I've felt this need to like hurry up and do this, make the music, we went on a lot of holidays this year actually, which let's not be like, I won't not be grateful, because it was a luxury to be able to spend that quality time with my family as well. But there is a balance, and financially, it wasn't the best use of our money to go on that many holidays. And also with young kids, they don't always work out that well. So we had our daughter in bed for 5 days in Vanuatu with what we thought was COVID for half of a holiday, in our first international holiday together. So yeah, I think that's something for the year ahead that I'm working on, is just, there's a very good chance that I will live a full and rich life. And I probably won't die tomorrow. And it's still a possibility, but it's unlikely. So maybe I don't have to hurry so much, and just those incremental things that you talked about of showing up
Yeah,
in small ways, in small moments.
yeah, totally.
Mm-hmm.
That's beautiful.
Mm.
What a 360-degree lesson on that.
Yeah. All right. I think we got 5 minutes. Are you happy to wind it up soon?
Yeah,
All
let's do
right.
it.
So the other question that you asked, which I quite like it's around the lines of what's been emerging for you in 2023 that might continue to grow in 2024. So a theme or an intent or a desire or an activity, anything. What's been emerging that's starting to take up more time and energy for you that you think might continue next year?
Well, I think that I imagine a lot's going to be different, especially if I take this time to travel. I feel this like new chapter, brink of change feeling. Um, and something that I've been able to feel at the end of this year, even navigating this change, it's been hard. And there's just this like really embodied sense of listening and trust myself and my body, of like what's supposed to happen, and can I just like rest back into that without the need to know all the details. And there are moments when I feel more capable and less capable of that. And I really, when I'm in that place, I just really trust that that's going to lead me somewhere interesting. So I want to kind of keep on that thread. um and Yeah, I think making space for joy. I don't know that that has fully emerged, but I noticed it was a thing that when I decided that I was going to travel, I guess, that was like prioritizing a joyful thing versus like just what makes practical sense, I guess. Which would be like getting another home like down the street so I could just move from one place to the other. But like what feels more joyful and alive is to take this time and have this experience. And I could see that in um my creativity. Like I think we talked about on one of our calls, I want to get a film camera and start
Yes.
taking photographs.
Yes.
And I mean, my writing, I didn't even really touch on this. I think the first half of the year felt so different from the second half, but I finally started sharing my poetry publicly. I went to a couple readings last year and read my work, and that was really cool. And I did some storytelling in a storytelling class, and that is for sure something I would like to be continuing. That just feels like a really rich part of me that I got to live out in Santa Fe, and I want that to be continuing and to take up more space. And I think I was mentioning this too, like welcoming my creativity back into some of my work. I like being able to separate it enough where
Mm.
not everything has to produce or be anything particular.
Mhm. Mhm.
And yet there is this part of me that is like jonesing for more of that energy um, in a healthier relationship, to have a healthier relationship with how I combine the two.
Yeah.
Um, and so I'm really curious what that might look like. And in workshops, in designing spaces, like I love designing spaces. I've really let that in, and I'm just really curious what that would look like. I have no idea how that will come more into my life, but just kind of trying to approach with openness of like, what might happen that I can't even quite see right now? And if I'm trusting and I'm following my instincts, like what could be possible for me?
Oh, wow. Travel is going to
When
be
I'm in
the
my best, that's it. What?
no, I mean, that's perfect. Travel is going to be so perfect for those intentions, because I can see like the opportunity to really like listen to the intuition of your body to inform decisions, what to do
Yeah.
next, where to go next. Is this right for
Yeah.
me? Not. And then the kind of the creativity of like spaces in Mexico as well, and the color, and what I imagine, I haven't been to Mexico, definitely on my bucket list. So can't wait to hear about that trip.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yay. I can't wait to share. How about for you? What's emerging?
Well, music is definitely emerging, and just creativity in general, like more of that sort of unbounded, free spirited, where anything's possible. I've recently had an experience recording a song called Two-Part Tragedy, where I had a violin player, a cello player, an alto sax player. We played like dozens of instruments, just really just like let the song guide us into these places and spaces that felt so delightful and just like weird and wonderful. So more of that, in whatever shape that takes, just more of that feeling is definitely big. On the back of like my work quietening down, I'm not winding up my business. And I did want to say, if I've got any clients listening as well, that I'm eternally grateful to my clients and the companies and the organizations that I've worked with over the last 7 years as well. And you can never take it for granted. It's a contract, it's an agreement for a certain amount of time. So nothing lasts forever. And I'm grateful to have done the work that I've done, and also the livelihood that's brought for my family as well. So this is something better for me next year. If work can continue to trickle along, that's great. And also, I'm going to have 2 days a week at least taking care of my daughters Monday and Friday, which it has started to emerge in the last month or so, where I've been spending more time with both of them. And I think with my buddy Matt passing away, and he has 3 gorgeous young kids as well, that feels like more pertinent for me, that, make it count. Like these years, everyone tells me who's got older kids now, it's like goes so fast, and it's like, yeah, it's dragging on right now. But I really am going to, make the most of being present with my girls next year as well. And my wife's going to be returning to closer to full-time work. We're both lucky to have the sort of like freelancey gig economy lifestyle, where we can move our time boxes around. So music, and I think also, just to what you sort of shared, what has been emerging for me is patience and humility, and also just like sitting and waiting for, not waiting, I guess, but just like actively listening for what's next. I'm open, point me into a direction and I'll try anything. So that's, I think, if my work continues to quieten down and no new work comes for the company next year, I'm going to be willing to try a few new jobs. I might even apply for a job at the recycling and waste facility. Who knows?
Yes.
That's the secret of happiness. I'm willing to get
That's beautiful.
right.
That's beautiful. So that, or the other random thing that you can't even predict right now, that brings you.
Exactly. Well,
Yeah.
at this age and stage as well, I've got so much evidence of like the times in my life where I have let go and I've just trusted and my intuition, and as opposed to trying to plan and control things, volcano eruptions, being drugged and robbed in Istanbul, like all these things that I wouldn't have chosen for myself have been ankylosing spondylitis, all these things that haven't chosen have ended up being the greatest gifts in my life as well. So what next, universe?
What
God,
next?
I'm ready.
That's That's the theme for next year.
What
Just
next?
what next.
In a good way, not like what next?
Yeah, exactly.
What next?
Totally. But in a,
Definitely
yeah,
matters how
we're
you say
listening.
it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Merry Christmas, my friend. I know you've had a little stomach bug today as well, so thanks for showing up.
Yeah,
It's been
totally.
great to, yeah, I felt a little, what's the word? Just like my wife and I have a word for it called schmuppy. Well, I felt a bit schmuppy today as well. So it's great that we can sort of drop into that space together and yeah,
Yeah,
love it.
totally. You're feeling inspired. I feel ready for what's next? Question mark.
What's next? All right. Take care. Talk to you in 2 weeks, eh?
Yeah.